We sent in your live.
Okay. Yep. We're live. Yep.
We're live.
Great. Okay. Thanks. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you. It's been a week already. Okay. We're going to start or come to order and start with the roll call. I'll go to our clerk or deputy clerk. Not sure who's going to do that today, but excited to see you both here.
Mayor Damon Siles.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Susan Romaine.
Present.
Councilmember Barbara Fouchie.
Present.
Councilmember Danny Nowell.
Present.
Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell.
Present.
And Councilmember Sammy Slade.
Present.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that today we get to start out by welcoming Wesley Barker, the town's new clerk. And I get to administer the oath of office to Wesley today. So I've never done this on Zoom before, and only once in person. So if I'm doing, Mary, you'll make sure I'm taking the right steps here, but I think I'll assume I'll ask Wesley to raise his right hand and repeat after me. I, Wesley Mitchell Barker, do solemnly swear
I, Wesley Mitchell Barker, do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States
that I will support and maintain the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of my office
the duties of my office
as clerk of the town of Carrboro,
as clerk of the town of Carrboro,
on which I am about to enter,
on which I am about to enter,
according to my best skill and ability.
according to my best skill and ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome, Wesley.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Appreciate it.
Great to see you. Very glad that we could take you away from beautiful Ashe County and welcome you to Orange County. And I look forward to the public getting to know you a little bit better in person,
Yes.
hopefully soon.
Yes, sounds good.
Great. All right, we will start out with our usual poetry reading if our poet laureate is present.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Fred, welcome.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
The floor is yours.
Okay. I am going to read a poem. Some of you may have seen this poem. It's been making its way around. And I feel kind of cliche reading it, but I think it's appropriate. It's by a poet that was born in the former Soviet Union in Ukraine. His name is Ilya Kaminsky. This is his book, Deaf Republic. He's a deaf poet. And he lives in America now. Very beautiful, beautiful poet. And this poem is kind of an indictment on all of us, as the title kind of implies. We lived happily during the war. And when they bombed other people's houses, we protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed. Around my bed, America was falling. Invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous rain, in the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war. That's it. This book, this book is such a timely book for right now. It's a great book regardless. It deals with differently abled people because, like I said, this poet is deaf, but it also deals with the question on the back of the book. What happens when the citizens of a country no longer hear one another? I think that's an appropriate question for us, and I think that's an appropriate question for that part of the world where these things are happening. So check that book out, Deaf Republic, Ilya Kaminsky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. Really powerful. Thank you. We'll see you next week, I hope.
Yep, I'll be here.
All right. Before we move on, I wanted to recognize Randy, who wanted to share just some brief remarks about situation in Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you, Damon. I would like to ask council to support our council generating a resolution for next Tuesday, March 8th, in support of the independence and the democratic Ukraine. I know we all recognize the courage and restraint and the will to persevere that the Ukrainian peoples are showing in their pursuit of sovereignty and democracy that they've enjoyed since 2014. So that would be my motion to write a resolution, and anyone who wants to work with me on it, I would welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. And I think maybe rather than a motion, what would be appropriate would be if there's anyone interested in joining with Randy to craft something in time for next week, that would be appropriate. But Randy, I appreciate you volunteering to take that on. And if there are folks either now or after the meeting who want to get in touch with Randy about helping to craft that, I think that would be really useful to have some multiple eyes on it. Right? Randy, thank you very much for offering to do that.
Thank you.
And Mayor and Randy, I'm happy to be helpful throughout the week on that. Happy to work with you and provide a second set of eyes.
Okay.
I am as well, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I'll be in touch. Thanks.
Okay. Next on our agenda is an announcement of upcoming meetings, and I'll go back to Mary and Wesley for that. And y'all are still on mute.
Okay, the Appearance Commission has a meeting on March 3rd at 7:30. And there's several cancellations. The Environmental Advisory Board, the Northern Transition Area Advisory Committee, the Planning Board meeting, and the Transportation Advisory Board. Those are all canceled. The meetings that were supposed to happen on March 3rd. Then on March 7th, there is a Carrboro Tourism Development Authority meeting at 3 o'clock. And on March 7th as well, a Human Services public hearing that's virtual, and that's at 6 o'clock. And then our next town council meeting, which is also virtual, will be next Tuesday, March 8th at 7 p.m.
Great. Pending adoption of a resolution later on our agenda. Thank you very much. Randy, we'll go to you next, and then we'll go to Susan.
Yes, next Monday is an El Centro CASA for Employment and Leadership meeting, advisory commission meeting.
Thanks, Randy. Susan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So the Local Government Affordable Housing Collaborative meets on Thursday, March 3rd from 5:30 to 7.
Great, thank you. Any others to note? I'll just mention that tomorrow I have a meeting, really a planning meeting for the Chamber's upcoming intercity visit. So I hope to have information more coming out about that soon. And then later in the week, I'll be attending the third meeting of the steering committee for the school district's strategic plan. All right. Next up, we have public comment, and this is for folks who wish to speak on items that are not on the agenda. I'm sorry, Barbara, and then,
Yeah, this is not about a meeting. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the first day of Women's History Month. It's a time to celebrate the contributions that women have made to the United States in various ways and around various causes. And so I should have done that earlier, but I just wanted to take a moment to do that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate that. Mary?
John Hartman Brown just let me know that the let's see which meeting, the TDA meeting is also canceled.
Okay.
The
it's like everybody's on spring break.
The Tourism Development Authority meeting, so that one's canceled as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Susan.
Yes, I just wanted to mention real quickly while we're talking about meetings is I wanted to, Mr. Manager, I just wanted to thank your town staff for the Carrboro Conversations drop-in sessions. And I just thought they were really very well attended, and staff did just a great job. It was everything from the suggestions on spending ARPA funds to update on 203 project. Affordable housing was added in thanks to Randy, and also some information about Creek Week, but it was just really, I thought it was just a really great way to bring community members closer to staff and have lots of great Q&A along the way. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Susan. I've heard some good things from multiple folks here and elsewhere about how those meetings went, so I appreciate that. And then finally, and Barbara, thanks again for raising the point about Women's History Month. Mr. Manager, you may have seen an email that came around today about an opportunity for us to coordinate with the local chapter of the National Organization for Women about an art exhibit. So I would appreciate us finding a way to participate in that. It's something that we had agreed to do as a town shortly before the beginning of the pandemic. And then, of course, things changed. So it's nice to have potentially an opportunity to revisit that. Okay, Barbara. And Barbara, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was trying to. So back to Susan's question, comments about our Carrboro Conversations. How often are we looking to do that? I mean, those were some pretty hot button topics, for right now, but certainly there are multiple others, things coming down the pike and just some other things in general. So I guess that would be Mr. White.
Yes, Council Member Fushi. That was the first time we did those. We're thinking maybe a quarterly schedule, depending on topics, but we might even do them more frequently. But for now, we're thinking about a quarterly schedule.
A what?
A quarterly schedule, about every 3 months or so. Yes.
Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Marion Wesley, you still have your joint hand raised. Is that on purpose or? No. Okay. Thanks. Okay. We have 2 people signed up to speak. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing maybe they are for matters not on our agenda. So this is the time for that. First person I have on my list is Jane, who, like me, has a name that is probably often mispronounced, and so I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But if we would invite Jane over, please, Mary. And then after Jane, we'll hear from Soteria Shepton. Jane, welcome. You're with us in the room now, and we can see you, and you look like you're unmuted too. So welcome, and please. Yes. We do ask that speakers try to keep their comments to within about 3 minutes or so. So I appreciate you trying to do that. And what can we do for you?
Yeah, thank you. And yes, my name is Polish. And I'm really grateful that Randy brought up the thing about Ukraine, because I was just agonizing about that earlier before dinner. So Randy, if I can do anything to help with the resolution crafting or whatever, call on me. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I also attended one of the Carrboro conversations last week and really thought that's a great forum for getting community involved. Tonight, I would like to speak about the proposal to develop the town-owned green space along Pathway Drive. I speak not only for myself, but for a large group of concerned citizens who live in the many neighborhoods bordering the Bowling Creek watershed. We understand that the town's plan is to conduct a site survey and then to engage with the neighborhoods. Instead, what we'd like to do is request a meeting with the mayor and town manager and the council or whoever before the town moves to step one, site surveys. We really want input and community engagement now and not after the development process has already started. From our point of view, there are two clear goods here in the situation. First, there's Carrboro's Community Climate Action Plan that prioritizes ecosystem protection and enhancement. The pathway parcels consist of continuous old hardwood forest and are part of the Bowling Creek watershed. Second, Carrboro's efforts to expand affordable housing, the needs are enormous and pressing. These are two community goods, and one should not and need not be sacrificed for the other. And I want to emphasize that. One should not and need not be sacrificed for the other. Last week, you heard from another of our community members on this issue. And I was one of those citizens back in 1999 who worked with the town of Carrboro for a win-win solution regarding the purchase of the MLK parkland and the preservation of valuable green space on Pathway Drive. I really think this can happen again, a win-win. I pledge myself to collaborate again now. As citizens, we wish to work for both climate action and affordable housing, solutions that are desirable for everybody, for all. Meeting prior to the towns conducting site surveys for development is critical in our opinion. We can provide important history and information regarding the pathway parcels. We really hope you'll agree and arrange to meet with us soon. And we just wanted to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane, so much for taking the time to join us tonight. I think unless the manager has anything he'd like to add, I think what I can do is follow up with him after the meeting to talk about what comes next in that process that you described. As you mentioned, the process that we adopted as a council a couple of weeks ago was really intended, very much explicitly intended, to front load the whole endeavor with community engagement. So I think that's in the spirit of what you're referring to, and I certainly intend for us to uphold that part of the process. I'll follow up with the manager after tonight and hope to get in touch with you about that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor and council members.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
And I'll call on Sammy to speak in just a second. Okay, Sammy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that Jane wasn't referring to our process in terms of the one that we've already laid out. In terms of, sounds like that they're concerned about the site planning not happening before the meeting with the community. Mr.
Right.
Manager, is that correct? Are we meeting with the community first before doing any site planning?
That's not a part of the process, and it's not to actually plan the site. It's just to do an analysis of the site to determine what potentially could go there. So no, that's not a part of the process as you have approved it.
It's
Right.
not part of it. Okay, yeah. So if we could just make sure we're following the process that we're telling the community and really involve the community up front to minimize and make sure we're all on the same page. At some point, though, site analysis would be very important, obviously, if we're going to be assessing potential for flooding of that property. And that's the kind of thing that site analysis is really good at arriving at. But I think it would be good, just as a bare minimum, to kind of like understand and hear what some of the concerns are via staff from the community members. And then follow through with the process, which is very community involved. So thanks to the neighbors for speaking to us, and thanks to staff for setting up that process.
Thank you, Sammy. Barbara?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jane, for coming in. I'm not going to butcher your last name either. Jane D.
Daniel Witz. Daniel Witz. You can butcher it. I don't care. I just say Daniel
I
Witz.
would never get it.
You can just call me Jane D.
Okay, Jane D. I wanted to go back to what the town manager said about what we as a council have already agreed to as far as the strategy around this whole process. And I think, Mr. White, you can you be a little bit clearer, because I know that there is space for the neighborhood community members to come in, but I don't believe it's this early. So is this something that we would have to, as a council, come back around, because I hear Councilmember Slade saying up front, like next, potentially even before a site survey. I'm not sure that's what Councilmember Slade meant. But just wanted to just kind of get you to put that strategy out again.
So yes, we would follow the council adopted strategy, and the first step, the next step would be to actually do the site analysis. Once that analysis is done, then we would engage the community. So that'd be the second step. That's the process that you approved in that order.
Okay, and then the community's engaged at several junctures there, right?
Yes, they've been engaged throughout the process, even though the process may look linear, if you will. We plan to engage community throughout the entire process.
Okay, so just trying to make sure that that's clear, for Jane, for others who are following this this whole process. Jane, is there? Do you understand? I'm sure you do.
Yes, I understand the process, and that's exactly what I'm asking not to have happen. We would like to be, the community would like to be involved as part of it, including the survey, pre-survey. We don't want to be involved after the survey, because the survey implies site development, and there are particular aspects of the survey. We're very concerned about it. Not only is there incredible amounts of stormwater runoff. Again, this is a continuous old hardwood forest. This is not just any old thing. It's a steep slope and ravine. There's horrible flooding right now. We have property owners there was lots of flooding because MLK Park was built. There's all sorts of nature and habitat and creek restoration issues. There's spring out and several creeks out in the middle of this path. It's not these parcels. The parcels are broken up into different sections. This is not it looks on the map very positive. And all I can say is extremely complicated. And I think, again, my feeling is we don't want to have we may have information as a community and be able to come together and work together that would affect even the survey. So we don't want it to be a post hoc thing. That's what I'm asking for, to have a meeting before the survey.
So you're asking for community engagement, site survey, then community engagement again, and then Mr. White, whatever step would come after that second one. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like, it seems to me that, again, it seems to me that there's room as part of that first step to do some of what exactly Jane is talking about, which is to really, the point of that first step is to understand the property. That includes the history of the property, the physical features of the property, the way that the property is, the way that the land is laid out. All of those factors to me seem to be part of that step one. I think that maybe what is certainly throwing me is that the word site survey suggests something very technical, and I think there will be technical elements to analyzing the property in that first step, but it seems to me that there's much room for more to happen in that step. So we can discuss that for sure. All right, Jane D, thanks again for joining us tonight. And it would be helpful to me, Jane, if you would send me an email just so I have your contact information. I'd appreciate that.
Yes, certainly. Okay.
Great. Thanks so much.
You. Yeah. Good night.
Thank you, Jane. So, Mayor, I have a question. So are we moving away from the approved strategy?
No, we're not moving away from anything unless the council says to do that.
Yeah, we just approved one. So I'm just trying to remember what step one was. And maybe that's me that needs that clarity, so that allows for, extra input, since we're still at step one, which is true.
Step one is conduct site surveys to determine actual development potential. So that is step one, which we haven't even reached yet. I would say we haven't even gotten there. So this is all very either on this property or on any of the other properties that the staff has identified as being potentially of interest. Sammy.
Yeah, I'm grateful, Barbara, for your bringing that up, because I think it's important for us either way to be clear with the community members in terms of what our process is. If we're responding to someone who's asking for something, then we need to be very clear about what exactly. And from what I'm hearing, Damon suggesting is that the first step, which is site analysis, I'm still concerned about, is what I'm also hearing from the neighbors, is that they don't want the site analysis to happen. So then it may be just a matter of how this gets diced in terms of steps within site analysis. But as we go forward, thank you, Damon, for being willing to meet with the neighbor and the manager, and let's just be sure that we're being as candid as possible with the community in terms of how that process and whether or not we're meeting their expectations and or the council's expectations going forward, and what we've told the community so far as for what we're doing. And if, I just look forward to that conversation and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think at this stage, what we can expect from the staff is to follow the process that the council has adopted. And the manager has heard the comments today from not only from our visitor, but also from the rest of us about what that first step might look like and what all it includes. And I think I would suggest that we want to hear more at some point from the staff when they're ready to get to that point about what that looks like. What does that step one fleshed out mean, right? Because I think that, given what we've heard tonight and what we discussed tonight, does that make sense to you, Mr. Manager?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Great. All right. Thanks again. Thanks very much. And thanks, Barbara and Sammy, for those comments. Okay, we have one more visitor this evening. Soteria can we welcome Soteria over, please, Mary? There she is. Welcome, Soteria. We can see you.
Oh, thank you.
We can hear you too.
Awesome.
Glad to have you with us tonight. As you know, we usually ask folks to try to keep their comments within about 3 minutes or so. So ask you to do that as well. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Shout out to you, Mayor, to council members. I get 2 months back to back. Last month was Black History Month, and by golly, it's Women's History Month this month. So I'm on a roll, y'all. 2 months to be great. I got it. I want to start by also thanking John Hartman Brown. To those of you who have been in Carrboro for a while, we are in the space, Present-Day, Maine, formerly known as Johnny's Pond Fishing, and we inherited this building, and some people get mad at things we can't control about what we inherited. And one of the things that I was very concerned about, was I was eating edamame before you called me, by the way. Shout out to vegetables. But we have like this one-way situation happening, and we had little cones as our signage. And I talked to John about getting Public Works to come out and put up a sign. So, we have an official one-way sign, and it says exit only. And it's been amazing. And people are very confused about how to get out of the shop now, which for me as a business owner is great. I'm like, just park it here until we leave. Thank you to John Hartman Brown for doing something about it. I've been trying to get that sign since 2017. So for me and most people, I realize that the only way we have a tendency to make change in our life is we have this way of living. We go from good things to great to bad things. And then when things get bad and shitty, we have a tendency to be like, oh, I got to revert back, to my good things. So I want you all to keep this in mind as I start talking about a few things that I know our town can do. The first thing that I will bring up, and hopefully I always remember, is just to be reminded of reparations. There are small towns that are doing it. There are not a million Black people in Carrboro, and I wonder if we will start with some of those founding families. Even if I'm not one of them, I'm originally from Virginia. I wonder how it would look to provide reparations. Something else I want to see for this particular town, the more investment in artists. There are towns that are giving artists stipends. I know I'm on the Economic Development Committee, and we have a revolving loan that most people, we don't even know what to do with the loan, right? And so I wonder if we started to prioritize artists and specifically BIPOC businesses, what will begin to happen with our community. I have been on the Carrboro task force for the last, I can't even remember how long we've been doing it now. But something that I wanted to bring up is we are bringing in outsiders and experts, and I think we are overlooking people in our town that are considered insiders and experts at those things we're trying to get done collectively. And so I have been adamant about believing that we don't need to take 20 years to do some things that we can do overnight. I'd like to remind you all, when I got to space, I still get stories about it being a good old boys club where my Black ass would not have been wanted. I am reminded of that several times a month at minimum. And I bring that up because within 1 week of getting the art outside of our demographic change from primarily white customers to Black, brown, and good Karens, as I like to call them, as well, and just healthy white people. And I want to continue to advocate on how important it is getting finances in the right people's hands. And so wealth generationally for white families has a tendency to move forward, right? But if you look at the generation of wealth for Black families, it has a tendency to move backwards. And so whereas people like myself, a millennial, take care of my mom, my grandmother was living, my mom was taking care of her mom. And so I want us to make sure we're acknowledging those things. I am grateful that my partner's mom had this space and entrusted us with it. And I believe that what we're trying to do here at the shop can transform to different spaces. So we've already been sponsored by the town of Carrboro. Thank you guys, and Randy Haven O'Donnell for that. And Chapel Hill wanted to hold on to their ragged ass money, but Randy made sure we got paid, the artist paid. Am I being recorded, Barbara? Because I hope I am. But what I also learned that all money ain't good money. So with that being said, with the money that we have as a town, most people want me to get excited because the town starts to employ Black people. I am not going to get excited because I want to see their resume. Guess what? Because it's only like 5 Black people here. And then if we choose a bad Black person, then all the white people are mad at the 5 Black people that you choose to represent my Black ass. You understand what I'm saying, Mr. White? I'm throwing you in here on you and Barbara. He like, I can't, ma'am. I'm on the clock. So he and I have already had a conversation about some of the town employees that have been hired and how white men are treating Black people in this town. And so I won't say publicly what happened, but I am entrusting in my beloved town, his ass was dealt with because what he did was egregious. And if I didn't have a relationship with the town, I would have had one of my white friends this white woman that was in the shop offered to do whatever she needed, call the police and all those things because it was that egregious. And so I just want to say, I want to feel safe, not just in my business, but in my home. And I want to thank all of you that patron the shop, that continue to support and invest in me as an artist and as a human being, that see me. And I also want it to be on the record that I am not an anomaly and I am not without fault. And at the same time, I am not without racism happening and sexism happening from town employees as well as people in the town. So kudos to you guys for taking on the role. And also, please, please, please remember, we don't have to go from good to bad, good to bad. Carrboro can be good and we can make it great. And when it gets great, we can continue to be greater. Thank you for your time.
Soteria, thank you for being here tonight. And I'll see you soon at the coffee shop.
Hey, I had my hand up for a comment.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
Thank you, Soteria, for coming in. I know that's a strong cup of coffee, but we all need to drink from it because she came in here and she told her truth from her space in the community. And she's not just coming in here just telling it just because. I mean, she wants us to absorb it, understand and help. I hear her asking for help. I hear her asking for support. She's getting it, and she said she is, but I'm hearing a little bit more than that. And so I just did want to acknowledge. And I mean, it's tough. And sometimes you got to put it where the goats can get it. You just got to put it out there like that. You can't sugarcoat it. You can't make it sound a certain way. I know some of this was shocking, for some. But this is some of the stuff that's happening within our community. And, we got to embrace all of it. We can't just embrace this little good part over here. We got to wrap our arms around all of it. And thank you so much, Soteria, for coming in here and just telling your truth. I mean, that's what it's about. That's how we know. We have to hear from the community. So thank you so much.
Next is Randy.
Yeah, thank you, Soteria. I know it wasn't easy to come and to speak about this, because I know from what you've said that this was a very painful incident. And I also know that some of the folks in the community stepped up. I'm wondering, and this is a question for council, what is the potential of the work of our Race Equity Commission to start to address some of the, the points that Soteria has made? And it's just an open question, because I think that this is something that, rather than let this get tucked away as one situation that was addressed, how do we learn from this and be able to incorporate the concern in how we move forward?
I think that, in my mind, in large part, that question is something that is sort of open for the Racial Equity Commission. And one of the things I've been looking forward to in the work of that commission is hearing what members of that commission have prioritized in their own discussions about things that could be addressed in the town. To me, like any of our commissions, that to me is kind of an open question for the commission to be wrestling with. So I hope that we'll hear more from them about that as their conversations continue, consistent with their charge. Soteria?
Thank you. If I can also add, by being on the task force the last couple of months, I feel like we're in a year now. The section around land use is so important to me, because where we are, we inherited a space. We have this great zoning, for better or worse, right? This building was here before zoning was even a thing, but we are still limited in what we can do. And there are things that I feel would make myself feel safer, clear signage. We were working with cones, and I'm just advocating again for things that most people don't think make them safe, but it does. We get these little yard signs that, the Black Lives Matters and Love Wins. Those are a lot of our signage comes in little signs like that because of some of the antiquated laws that are still oppressing the creativity that I know I want to share with Carrboro. And I talked to Councilmember Foushee about getting the privilege of speaking and doing my art and poetry for a company in New York. I don't want to continue to do things for free in my town when people are going to pay me thousands of dollars, and I'm not exaggerating, to do it elsewhere. I want to take that same creative energy and make sure that my town where I live is getting the best of me. And I can't do that constantly for free, being on boards for free. And I know we are getting up to that season around budgeting. And I would have you think about all the boards we have, how many Black people are actually on these boards. And some of it, I believe, is not because we're not interested, but because of timing. We run 3 businesses, my partner and I can't give my free time without being invested in financially for it to make sense. And so when you think about some of these land use policies that we are stuck in for some reason, I really plead with you all to think about how we can use this space. I wanted to create, I know I came on talking about the containers so that we can have small businesses, affordable spaces as well. I'm not trying to have a damn strip club right here. I really want people to be able to afford to have their business here. And I understand that housing is a struggle as well. And if I would ask everybody outside of Barbara, how many Black-led businesses do we have in the town? From the top of your head, do you know? Can you just answer that? Can anybody give me that right now without Googling it? How many Black-led businesses does Carrboro have? And okay, that's a huge silence, y'all. We got to do better. I think it's like, it ain't a bunch of us. You guys got to know where we are. And I'm not just coming here for me. I feel seen by the town, but I have a relationship with people because that has literally helped me survive at every part of my life. I'm here from the people that don't know that you'll do the good thing to the great thing. That's who I'm here for. And so please consider changing some of these laws around planning and land use. I don't need to hoard this half an acre of land for a coffee shop. I don't need to do that. I want to share it. Sophie and I want to share our land with people. We really do. So please consider that.
Thanks, Soteria. I am looking forward to having some of those outcomes part of our comprehensive plan that you've been working hard on. So I appreciate you adding some context to it. Okay, Barbara.
Yeah, and just real quick, Mayor, because I know we have to move on. And I appreciate you bringing up the Racial Equity Commission and what the charge of that commission is. But I have to say that it takes all of us. The Racial Equity Commission, yes, we've been charged with certain items through our resolution for reparations for Black Carrboro, but certainly it's going to take each one of us who are in elected seats, staff, other community members, to realize some of the things that Soteria is talking about. I mean, we're all going to have to dig in the way that we can, whatever we're able to bring to the table in the situation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you again, Soteria. Hope to continue this conversation. Okay. I believe, Mary, if I'm not mistaken, those were our two folks signed up. Is that correct?
Yes, that's all we had.
Great. Thank you. And we'll move on next to the consent agenda. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is the approval of the minutes from the January 18, 2022 meeting. The second item is a resolution adding a March 8th, 2022 Town Council meeting.
The council members, as you know, we will need to poll item number 2 and consider an amended resolution that, in addition to adding the March 8th meeting, removes the May 17th meeting, which is the new date of the primary election. So let's pull that item. Is there a motion to approve item number 1?
So moved.
Is that Barbara, was that a motion with your hand or? Okay, and seconded by Randy, that we approve item number 1 on the consent agenda. All in favor say aye. I'll do a roll call vote. Barbara?
Sorry, Mayor. Aye.
Thank you. Randy?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Great. So as I mentioned, we have an amendment to the resolution in our packet for item number 2, which, as I said, again, for folks listening, we're adding back the March 8th meeting, council meeting, which is next Tuesday, which we had previously canceled because that's when the primary was originally scheduled. And now we are canceling the May 17th meeting. Do I have that right, Mr. Manager? Great. Is there a motion to approve that amended resolution? Or any? Susan, seconded by Danny. So it's been moved by Susan and seconded by Danny that we approve the amended resolution. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor, I'll do a roll call vote. Barbara?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And Mary, I'll clarify that I voted aye on both of those. I forgot to mention that in the last one. Okay, matter passes unanimously. Okay, we're gonna move on to other matters, Mr. Manager.
The first item is a request to set a public hearing on land use amendment relating to setbacks. The purpose of this agenda item is for the town council to consider setting a public hearing on a potential text amendment, modifying the setback provisions as they relate to exterior steps. A resolution setting a public hearing date for April 19, 2022 has been prepared. An advisory board review has also been requested prior to the public hearing. And Christina Moon, our planning administrator, will provide an overview of the item.
Thank you. I'm assuming that Tina is the person labeled as Randy Dodd in the participant list over there. But it is Tina.
Let me see if I can change my name real quick. Apologies for that. Okay, I have, if it's okay for me to share my screen, I have just a short presentation with some images, which I hope will provide a little bit of clarification.
Okay.
Okay, success.
Yes, I think so. Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, I'll just jump right into this. And thank you for some of the questions. I'll touch on some of those points and then try to provide a few more visuals for some clarification. So I think, as a lot of you know, the dimensional standards in the ordinance are in Article 12, and we'll focus tonight on the section 15-184, which relate to building setback requirements. I've underlined the key section here, the key passage, which is that the setback provisions speak to the whole building, including things sticking out of the building, so to speak, such as decks, porches, and in this case, exterior steps. So I've tried to provide a little bit of a visual for this kind of quaint home in New England to show the line here showing that the building setback would count from this side staircase, not from the actual building. That would be where the measurement would be taken. As was some background of where the origins of this text amendment has come from, is that zoning staff received and approved a site plan that didn't include any steps or any type of a landing, but only a sidewalk which led from the main road to a side entrance. And I'm showing you that image from the side. As construction moved forward, the finished floor elevation was raised a few feet, which necessitated some way to bring the grade up to that side entrance. And so staff suggested some different options, including the steps into the inset that you can see in the image, or adding some type of fill to raise the grade. Ultimately, the builder preferred not to choose either of those options, but rather to go before the Board of Adjustment. After some discussions, it seemed the better approach was to bring forth the text amendment, which would provide an opportunity for the council to make what would be considered a policy change, or to consider a policy change, and to provide some guidance so that we could make this a very focused type of a text amendment. And so again, I'm showing you a plot plan where you can see what we're talking about here in the red circle. And so the hatch line would be the building setback. And this would be a scenario where the stairs, a short landing, and a couple of exterior steps would extend into the building setback. So the draft ordinance that's in your packet, and I've got another visual, apologize for all these visuals, but I'm trying to make this as clear as possible. The draft ordinance in your packet provides a scenario where exterior steps, and this would be whether they're of masonry or wood construction, could extend up to 50% into the building setback, subject to some specific criteria, meaning that the stairs can only be about 3 feet high, and that's from the finished grade, and that reference to section 15-185 G1 is in the section of the ordinance where we define how you determine the finished grade height related to heights in other sections of the ordinance. So this is consistent. And it provides a limit as to how wide landing can be and how long the whole unit landing and steps can be. be eligible for this provision. And this is a large deck or a big side type of a unit, but something that would provide some type of additional access to the side or rear. So there's a resolution in your packet which provides for setting a public hearing for mid-April, as well as referring this to Orange County Planning Board, and the Appearance Commission seems like the other relevant advisory board. So I'll stop there, and I can stop my screen share unless the visuals are helpful for discussion.
Great. Thank you, Tina. I think you can probably remove your screen share. I appreciate you providing the background for where this amendment came from, the proposed amendment came from, and you're asking us to schedule a public hearing. But first, let's hear from Sammy, and then we'll go to Randy.
Thanks, Tina, and thanks, Manager White, for follow-up to that question on the genesis of this. One of the reasons I was interested is, sometimes we change rules so that we can accommodate construction that is in process. And I think that isn't necessarily the best way of creating rules. But we do learn from experience on the other hand. And so I guess one thing I would want to better understand is what the function of setbacks are. Because on the flip side to this question of allowing steps is the question of the height. And in this case, it sounds like it's very much determined by this specific construction that's happening, and that's kind of the height they need. But suppose there's a two-story building, and they wanted to do stairs up to there. That's not what's being proposed through this ordinance. But my question gets back to this bigger question: what's the function of setbacks? And since we're changing the rules, why would we not consider a higher and bigger staircase? Is it solely a thing, an aesthetic quality? Are we talking about a function of permeability, how permanent a structure is, and the cost related to it? And consequently, a bigger structure would represent a bigger cost and mean something harder to remove. So what I'm trying to get to is like, what's the general for our community reason for us to approve this beyond, how to get around this one specific construction instance? And again, recognizing that there's value in that construction instance too. So I guess the question's for Tina. What's your sense of what the value of setbacks are? And maybe that's why we're referring this to the Appearance Commission.
Yeah, I think, thanks. I'll recognize Tina in just a second. I ask, Sammy, thanks for that question. I guess one thing I'd suggest is one of our purposes, right, in potentially scheduling a public hearing is to have an opportunity for advisory boards to weigh in on exactly some of those questions and for us to then consider them fully during a public hearing. But I don't say that to forestall an opportunity for us to get some questions answered now. So I just wanted to just throw that out there, though, that we will, if we schedule a public hearing, have an opportunity to learn more. Tina, would you like to respond to Sammy's question?
Sure. Although you may wish to I can offer a couple of responses, and then you may wish to kind of delay your big conversation again to the public hearing. So the 3 foot height was selected in looking in an effort to be consistent with other parts of the ordinance. If you look at the requirements related to fences and berms, it's that 3 foot height which kicks in when a setback is required. So that was where the height came from. So I'll kind of start with that. Generally there is interest in providing some separation between buildings, as well as opportunities for drainage, vegetative screening, a certain amount of light and air, access to maintenance. There is, I think, a public interest of retaining some type of separation between buildings.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you, Tina. Next, we have Randy.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Tina, for providing the visuals. It makes it much easier to digest the options. Do you know of situations where there really is not a setback? You know, where there's, you know, the buildings are coming right up against each other in terms of, and I'm not talking New York City, but I mean locally where that's done, and is that problematic?
Marty might be a little bit better able than I am at speaking to specific examples, but the ordinance does provide for the architecturally integrated subdivisions to go down to a 0 lot line. And typically where you see that, you don't find a scenario where there's literally building next to building, but rather all of the buildings tend to be shifted toward one side of the lot, so that the building which has almost is positioned almost at a 0 lot, the building next to it on the adjacent lot would have the additional space so that you would retain that separation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Marty's appeared. I don't know if you want to add to that from your experience.
Yeah, while I was transitioning over, I didn't catch all of what you said, Tina. So if I'm not repeating, or stop me if I am, I would just note that, you know, and as we allow architecturally integrated subdivisions, we do allow buildings, you know, potentially to be located very close to one another. And, you know, this particular situation that brought this before us happens to be within an architecturally integrated subdivision. So, yeah, I mean, to the extent that we allow developers to create their own setbacks, you know, it's kind of market driven as to how much separation folks tend to want from one another. You know, lots have gotten smaller over the years and closer. So that's kind of a trend we've seen, I guess, in part driven by our 40% open space requirement. But I'm being long-winded. I suppose the short answer is that there doesn't seem to be any significant potential, you know, adverse impact. Developers are choosing to push the houses closer together as a trend, it seems.
And so the recommendation is to go to the Board of Adjustment, not the Appearance Commission. Which one is it? I want to be clear, because Sammy said appearance. I thought it was a Board of Adjustment.
Now,
this resolution
was one to go to the Board of Adjustment. There was an appeal filed to take it to the Board of Adjustment. And the staff's discussion regarding it was that it might be more appropriate to have council make a policy decision about the matter rather than the Board of Adjustment interpreting what the ordinance says.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Marty, and thank you, Tina. Before we move on, I want to note for Tina, I don't know if you can help me with this, but there's someone with a raised hand in the waiting room named David Hutton. Is that someone you know related to this agenda item, or if Mary knows?
I don't know that name. It may be the person that you know brought this particular issue before us. I know they were going to be watching, so maybe they're just.
Yeah. Members, how do you feel about bringing Mr. Hutton over? I'm not sure what he's here for, but Mary, why don't we go ahead and do that? Hi, David. Welcome. Are you here to speak on this item?
Sorry, this is Peter Jitto. I can't change my name in your thing, so it's stuck to whatever I sign in for, and that's my assistant's name. He does most of my Zooms for me.
Can you introduce yourself and let us know how you're related to this whole little situation?
Yeah, I'm Peter Jitto. I'm the builder there at Winmore, and I built the house, and Marty and I have been dealing with this since about July. So I am the builder. I built 4 houses in Carrboro. That was my last one. And so I just wanted to say that, and I heard a couple of people talk about how it was affecting the lot lines. And I just wanted to point out that Marty and I discussed the ways to get there, and I did follow the instructions of the town, because I did put the sidewalk on my plot plan, And I've just never seen in any other municipality a sidewalk be considered part of a building. And it wasn't. So that's why I built what you guys are considering a building as far as the steps there. So it wasn't like I built something that wasn't proposed and then coming back to you and asking after for you guys to change your text. I built it, I put it on there. In every other municipality in the area, steps do not meet the definition of a building. A building is clearly defined as a habitable structure. And so Marty and I went back and forth. We had my lawyer involved, and I followed the Board of Appeals. And in that, my memo, I said, here's the 100 pictures of all the other houses in Winmore that break the rules. Are we going to go file against all of them? Because I built 3 other houses like this that were the exact same as this. And I'm not going to make them come in front of it, but we would all be going to the Board of Appeals in that subdivision because all of them have steps that were there. And I drove around with Marty, I took pictures, and that's where he also went around and looked at it. So I just want to make it clear that I didn't, and I don't like to go to town councils afterwards and say, hey, change rules for me because I'm a builder and you should do what I'm asking. I put it on the plans. This is the way 99.9 other Senate communities treat steps, not as part of the building. It's not a covered porch, it's just a set of steps, as you can see by my pictures. And that was defined by the town and what the finished floor elevation had to be in the neighborhood. So I just don't like people to think that I came to you afterwards and said, I did this thing wrong, please fix this for me. And that's just my thing. I heard Sammy say that, and I can understand how a town could feel that way, that a builder's just saying, fix this. These steps were on there. They weren't called steps because you typically don't call steps out on a plot plan. You call out a sidewalk, which is there. And if a sidewalk has to have grade in it, you put steps in it, and that's what I did. So I just want to put it out there. I didn't try to do something backwinded and then get caught.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that information. And council members, I would like to get us closer toward considering the resolution that I know that Sammy has a comment, and then Barbara. Sammy?
Yeah, I just express appreciation for Mr. Gitto and sharing that background. You know, that's the kind of information I think is valuable for us if we're going to be changing the rule, and you know, everywhere else it already allows steps irrespective of height. I would be interested in hearing from our planning board and the appearance commission, not just on what staff is proposing, but this bigger question on steps generally, and in terms of you know, allowing for height into a second story too. And perhaps staff could provide context to us too in terms of what is allowed typically by other municipalities in terms of steps and setbacks, and relate that also to heights. And ideally, if that information could also be provided to the planning board and appearance commission so that they could depart from a good basis of information. So I would like to move the resolution with that request for staff to provide information about how other municipalities treat steps, but to also include looking at steps that go to a second story.
Okay, thank you for that addition, Sammy. Is there, Barbara, I'll come just to you, but just procedurally, is there a second to the motion that Sammy just made? Randy,
I'm going to.
Okay.
That was it, but Sammy moved it along with, you know, the other part that he wanted in there, the other information that he was asking for the planning board and the appearance commission. So I can second it because I was going to move it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved. The resolution in our packet has been moved and seconded with the addition of 2 requests that staff offer to the advisory boards as well as to the council when it comes back to us. And that is information about how other municipalities typically handle these situations with steps, as well as some information about what it might mean to consider doing this for upper levels. Is that right, Sammy? Okay.
Yes.
Any discussion of the motion? All right, I will take a roll call vote. Please say aye if you approve and no if you don't. Barbara?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Sandy?
Aye.
And Damon votes aye. The matter passes unanimously. So this will be coming to the town council It looks like April 19th. Tina, thanks very much. Good to see you. All right. Mr. Manager.
The next item is an ordinance to accept Article 46 funds and to amend the budget.
Okay. And do we have a staff presentation?
Yes, John Hartman Brown will give an overview.
We will wait for John to magically appear on our screens. There he is. Welcome, John.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll just give you a quick rundown of what this is about. So in the staff report, I discussed this in more depth, but essentially Orange County has passed a 1/4 cent county sales tax. And that additional sales tax, half of that goes to our school systems and the other half goes to economic development activities in the county. And the county shares a portion of those funds that go towards economic development with the municipalities in the county as well. And these funds are called the Article 46 funds that the town would receive on an annual basis. They are restricted to fund economic development activities, and we are required to report back to the county on what those funds will be used for. I have highlighted just a few of things that I know is of interest to council and that we've talked about in the past, of doing something like maybe a site analysis for the Old 86 property, potentially doing some kind of marketing campaign for our downtown businesses. Of course, with the Owasso sewer construction happening right now, that's a disruption. The DOT is going to be coming through following that with some additional disruption. And of course, we'll have the 203 project happening as well. So lots of construction in the foreseeable future. So potentially doing some kind of marketing campaign around that, as well as doing partnering with the SBTC and doing some BIPOC and Latinx business accelerator and entrepreneurship programs, training opportunities with that as well. So those are just some examples of things that we're kind of thinking of at this point to use the funds for. Obviously, that won't expend all of the funds. The amount total for this year is actually $13,800. However, there were some funds that were left unbeknownst to me last year. And so combined, those total funds that we'll have access to are $27,575. So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Great. Thank you, John. Before I go to Susan and then to Randy, John, I just have a couple of quick questions or comments. One is, I think in previous years, council members will remember that we've received occasional reports about how the county in general has been kind of divvying up the Article 46 tax revenues among the municipalities, and just discussion about opportunities to be a part of that process for accessing those funds. So I just, I don't remember the last time we got a just a general report about how those funds have tended to be divvied up, and whether Carrboro is doing a good job of getting access to those funds or as much as we should be. So just wanted to note that for the future. And second, as I understand your presentation, the ideas for how we would spend this money, it's not set in stone at this point. It's more about right now just accepting the money so we can put it in the budget, and then we'll have it for you all, for the staff to come back to us with some more firm conclusions about how you want to spend it. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. At this point, there's nothing specifically set in stone. But yes, it will be just accepting and signing the MOU, authorizing the town manager to sign the MOU and the budget amendment to appropriately add the revenue expenditure requirement for the.
Thanks very much, John. So first up, we have Susan, then I'll go to Randy, and then to Sammy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, John. Since we're just at that phase of looking at different options, I just wanted to throw out one more idea to add into the pot. So I know that the town has been researching the possibility of taking ownership of Main Street and some other North Carolina Department of Transportation owned streets in Carrboro. And there would certainly be some safety reasons for doing this. We would have more control over maybe, slowing the speed limit and wider sidewalks. But also it would certainly help with our economic development. As people move more slowly, there's more opportunities to be thinking of downtown as not so much driving through downtown Carrboro, but driving to downtown Carrboro and stopping and gathering and perhaps spending a little bit of money along the way. So I'm just throwing out this idea. I've seen a back of the envelope estimate that, taking ownership of Main Street would be, I've seen a number, $80,000, $82,000, obviously much more than what we have here in the Article 46 funds, but maybe even a part of that could be applied to this should we get to that point. Thanks, John.
We'll be certain to take that under advisement.
Sorry, I just realized I'm muted. Randy, you're next, and then Sammy. And now you're muted, Randy.
Yeah. Thank you, John, for putting this together. Thank you for keeping a good eye on it. My question, actually, Damon jumped in with my question. I was wondering on the divvying up of the monies, whether or not you know offhand, because I didn't see it in the materials, if Carrboro gets a certain percentage and it's kind of locked in, or are the monies really dependent upon the project? So that's the first thing I wanted to ask.
It's my understanding that the funds are divvied up based off of a population calculation that's done. So the number would be fixed for, I'm not sure how frequently that is assessed or reassessed as the municipalities grow. But I would, the short answer is that would be more of a fixed number. We would get this certain amount every year.
Right. And I guess, Mike, I just wonder about this, is if you would find out if Chapel Hill's population is based on the local population with or without student base. I'd be very curious to find that out. Second, I think there's great opportunity for this. And I was wondering, is this something that is going to come back to the ESC for discussion?
Yeah, I would intend, I try to keep the ESC very informed of my activities that I'm doing. So I would definitely want to seek the advisement of the ESC and ensure that the activities are aligning with their strategic plan as well. So making sure that we're aligning, the activities we're doing with the ESC's objectives and goals, as well as the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Well, then with that, and Damon, I don't know, when I looked over the attachments A and B, do both of them need to be moved? Can they be moved together? And if so, I'll move them.
I don't see a reason why we couldn't approve both in a single motion. So I'll take your motion and then ask if there's a second by the next person signed up to speak, and that's Sammy. Sammy, do you want to second the motion to approve both of those items?
Sure, I could do that.
Okay, great. So it's been moved and seconded, moved by Randy, seconded by Sammy, and it looks like we have some more discussion. So Sammy, you're up, and then we'll go to Barbara.
Yeah, thanks, John, for bringing this to us and for all the work that you do always. Yeah, this is news to me. I mean, historically, the Article 46 monies were allocated per grants that were submitted to the county, and then the county would give. those funds. I'm glad that they're allocating a small portion of those monies in this manner. And so my first question would be, since when has this been happening? John, it sounds like this is, well, by reading the materials, it's cumulative. Sounds like maybe this is only 2 years old, given that there are funds from last year available too. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And some of this was oversight on my part. I was not aware that the Article 46 funds were available to us. And so this year, when the county assistant economic development director emailed me and said, you have Article 46 funds, how would you like to spend them? I said, well, okay, this is news, but I'm glad to take money. So
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't blame yourself if they don't tell you. Then why would you ask? You know. Well, I'm glad they told you eventually. That's good to hear. And then in light of the Soteria's conversation earlier, I think beyond what's allocated per jurisdiction via these funds, there's an opportunity to really solicit and tap in via the grant process that these funds are made available for some of the BIPOC and locally owned support of businesses, because there's a bigger chunk of money represented by Article 46. And so that's the second point. And then the third one is, along with what Damon was pointing out, if we could get an update from the county in terms of how they are allocating. Most of the funds were, I mean, the whole Article 46 was in large part created to run sewer and water to these economic development zones to attract businesses from outside of the county, which is not really a locally owned project. But it would be good to get an update in terms of how that's going and how much longer these Article 46 monies are tied up in the sewer and water for supporting business as usual, attracting businesses from outside. Because potentially, eventually, these monies may be bigger once that's freed up, and we can use them to support our locally owned businesses in towns. So those are all my comments. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Sammy. Barbara? And Richard,
thank you.
Richard, I saw your hand. I'll have you up next. Sorry.
Yes, that's okay. Yeah, so again, I do, it's just really timely that one of our BIPOC business owners was in tonight giving public comment, and then we have actually some money, hopefully to go towards some of the very issues that she was raising. And so I just want us to just keep that in mind as we move forward with the money and what to do about it. Happy to hear that ESC will get an opportunity to kind of talk about it and see, different ways that the money can be spent for our local businesses and also our BIPOC businesses, just kind of putting it back in, to some of our local businesses and BIPOC businesses. So I think that would be good. That would be an extra infusion, of money at a really critical time. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. Richard, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to note that in the MOU, in the first section, it lays out the formula of how these funds are allocated. It's a long sentence to read, but that formula is in the MOU.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Got it. Thanks, Richard. All right, there is a motion on the floor, which has been seconded. Motion by, okay, you're gonna have to correct me if I get this wrong. I believe it. Motion was by Sammy and second was by.
Nope, I made the motion.
Other way around. So motion was by Randy, seconded by Sammy, that we both approve the ordinance, which will amend the budget, as you see in the attachment, and the other thing, which will also part of the motion, will authorize the manager to approve the MOU or to execute the MOU. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Please say aye if you approve. Barbara?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
And Damon, I vote aye. looking forward to hearing more from staff in the future about how we spend these monies. Thank you, John.
Thank you all.
Okay, Mr. Manager, you're back.
The next item is the 203 project status update. The purpose of this item is to provide council with an update of the 203 project, including the status of the guaranteed maximum price development. And this item will also provide an update on project financing and the next steps. And there'll be several speakers tonight, and we'll begin with Ben Shemadiki, our capital projects manager.
Great, and I believe, Mary, we have a number of folks, 3 or 4 folks who are here for this item related to the team who was working on this. Is that right? So do you want to go ahead and just bring them all over?
Mayor. Yeah, so do we want to wait until the end before we engage in any questions? Do we want to do it section by section as each speaker comes along? What are your thoughts? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I might ask the manager to weigh in. I guess I would, and generally think it would be a good idea to just have the staff's complete presentation. But Mr. Manager, you may have this divided up in a certain way that I don't know about. So maybe you have an idea about that.
We do, yes. There are several sections of the presentation, and we do plan to pause to check with council as we move along.
Okay, good. Sounds good. Thanks for asking that, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ben, you're in the spotlight.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening. We hear you and we see your presentation. Thank you.
All right. So here's a bird's eye view of the 203 building. We have some new information for you tonight. On the agenda, we'll do a status update. We'll review the budget. We'll present the draft guaranteed maximum price with Barnhill Contracting Company. And then Finance Director Arch McAdoo and our financial consultant David Cheatwood will be providing information on project financing, and we'll take a look at next steps. And so we're going to pause between, we're going to pause right here before we go to Arch for questions.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
So I've just included a quick refresher for everybody here. So the 203 project will be the home of Orange County Southern Branch Library, Orange County Skills Development Center, Carrboro Recreation Parks, Cultural Resources, and more, including a 171 space parking deck. And I'll just note here that the county is receiving the same report at their meeting tonight. So here's the first floor plan. This is the same design as you've seen before. So the library is here on the left. The orange represents Orange County space, blue, Town of Carrboro, gray shared, and then you see the WCOM studio in green at the top of your screen. And I'll just point out the entrance to the parking deck is here on the right. So moving up to level 2, parking deck on the east side of the building. And here we have Orange County Skills Development classrooms, some town programming area, and the teen center. And the third floor, we have Recreation Parks and Cultural Resources offices, the Orange County Skills Development office suite, and some additional programming, including the terrace. So the last time we provided an update was in October. Last time we were at it, presented to the town council, and we gave you all an update on the construction documents, utilities, and cost. Since then, the team's been working on permitting and bidding. The town released a solar RFP on February 6th, and that was to explore solar procurement options for the 203 project and other town facilities. And so Barnhill has been reviewing bids and interviewing subcontractors, developing the guaranteed maximum price, or GMP. And last week we did hold 3 community engagement drop-in meetings. It was nice to talk to the public about the project. And so before I get into project costs, just some background on Barnhill. They were chosen by the town and Orange County in 2018 through a qualifications-based process. They've been involved with pre-construction. They've been working closely with the design team, and their focus is primarily on value management, constructability, and they've been performing all of the cost estimating at each design milestone. And they conducted the bidding, and they will manage all aspects of construction. So here I will present the GMP, but first, just a quick look at the budget and cost history of this project. And so on the left, this is the original construction budget approved in February of 2020. This is a total construction cost of $23.5 million. The blue indicates the town share, and the orange is the county's. So we started out off a little over $10 million for the town and about 13 for the county. The schematic design estimate was done in November 2020. And so at that time, we had an updated floor plan and an updated cost allocation. So the cost allocation is split currently 44.52% town, 55.48% county. And that's based on building square footage and parking usage. And so you can see the county's portion went up a little bit more than the town's at that point. And the next milestone was the design development package, which was completed in May of last year. And the estimate on that was $27.47 million. And so that's a town cost of about $12 million and a county around 15. And so now the project has been bid, and we've received the draft GMP from Barnhill, and that figure is $34.7 million. So the town's share is about $15.5 million, and the county's is just under 19, and that's for construction. So, as we've talked about before, this project has seen escalation at every step. Even with our best efforts for value engineering, which we've been doing along the way, I think every aspect of the project has been scrutinized, and all the savings have been taken out of the project. And so here's just a list of some of the big ticket bid packages. Steel has gone up considerably since the last time the project was estimated. Concrete, plumbing, and then the water and sewer utility work. But in general, every trade and product has seen significant escalation across the board. And the reasons mostly attributed to pandemic, with labor shortages, supply chain disruptions. So here I'm going to ask Eric Pond and Chad Webb to join me. They're going to talk a little bit more about the construction market and what a guaranteed maximum price project means. And they're going to kind of describe this table here a little bit as well.
Thank you, Eric and Chad. Welcome. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having us, Mayor. Chad, do you want to start with I kind of discussing the last slide there, some of the escalation?
Yeah, I can discuss. Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. We're excited to be a part of this project. I think everybody can recognize kind of where we've been over the last 2 years. Hopefully we're coming out of this pandemic, but what we haven't seen yet is any relief when it comes to the supply chain issue, and then the ever continuing rise of costs on the commodity side. And Eric's going to talk a little bit about what that means and how we've I guess evolved from establishing our original budget to currently where we sit with the GMP. The Fred report provides a lot of historical data based on the commodity index, and what we've seen over the last year to 2 years overall, we've seen an uptick in the construction industry of about a 25 to 30% price escalation, driven a lot around the commodity side. Some of that is being driven from the demand on our industry with workforce, but I could say the main contributing factor to Ben's point has really been driven based on the supply chain issues that we've had, and also just really around the big cost drivers as he mentioned, which is steel. That's probably where we've seen the hardest impact over the last probably 12 or 14 months. There has been a lot of demand on raw material products. Not to get into the whole scenario of why that's happened, but we've had some large consumers buy raw material products and build huge distribution centers, and that has put a squeeze on things like bar joists and deck and things like that, which has driven the supply shortage that we're dealing with across not just the state of North Carolina, but really the whole U.S. and global effects. So, Eric, why don't you walk them through the graph and kind of some of the metrics behind what we're showing here today, please?
Yep. Okay. So what I have here is so obviously all the contributing factors, escalation, labor shortages, and stuff like that. This graph does a good job here. This Fred graph on the left does a good job of kind of giving you a linear representation of what we've experienced in the construction industry, we as construction managers and owners alike. But as you can see, the original budget that Ben had pointed out was established in March 2020, which is identified there on the left-hand side. That was a budget of $25,231,503. So that was kind of right in the beginning of COVID there. Fast forward 24 months into January 2022, we're at approximately $33,904,000. What this does is it uses the producer price index. So it's the cost index. So the cost index in March 2020 was 153. So that's when business was booming. We were able to put exact dollar values on what things could cost and stuff like that. And then you can kind of see as you head into April, July, there's kind of starting to go with that uptick, and even further into April and July. In January 2022, the cost index was 205. So from 153 to 205, you can see that there's a substantial increase in the cost of commodities and what's being reported. We were going through at the peak between January, kind of at its going to its highest point. This was where a lot of that value engineering was kind of happening. So that value engineering was happening, but it was fighting an uphill battle against escalation. So we were VE dollars out of the project, but it was going right back in with material costs. Certainly, there's added costs with labor shortages. That's certainly no surprise. Everyone's hurting for skilled workers. So I think this graph does a good job of laying out kind of, where we were 2 years ago and kind of where we are today. And it's really based on those indexes. This chart here on the bottom right shows the price. The blue line represents where projects were bid out. So that means cost of work. So in this instance, we would fall on that blue line. It shows it from September. What it does is it's a statistic based on the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and the contractors will report to them how things ended up, what things cost at the time of the bid, and then where they actually ended up after construction. So you can see that there's a substantial difference between the blue line and the red line, and that red line is actually the cost that was experienced and realized due to escalation over the course of the last year. So I think that does a good representation. I think we feel confident in the scope of work and that we have accounted for escalation and that we've captured the project as a whole. Additionally, there's some cost up here in the top right. You can kind of see some of the construction materials increases. Steel mill products, as Chad was mentioning, we've seen 127% increase since 2020. Fuel, which that's a 55% increase. Might not seem like a huge impact to a project, but when you think about bringing materials in and out, and with current global affairs that are going on, it's likely you'll see that increase as well. Some other big ones that we've been hit with too that aren't shown on this list are concrete, polyiso board, insulation, things of that. So it's not limited to just one trade, and certainly not just this project alone. It's nationwide, and everyone's kind of dealing with it here. I have if you guys are interested in a little bit of reading material, I also have a construction inflation alert from the Association of General Contractors, AGC. That's a month, it came out in February 2022, that gets in a little bit more detail of what we're experiencing in the industry. But yeah.
I'll just point out that, per this chart, we're kind of back on an uphill trend. And as Eric mentioned, with some of the conflict in the world right now, escalation will likely continue to increase. But I did want to just explain what a guaranteed maximum price means for the project. And so Barnhill was selected as the construction manager at risk for this project, and that at risk connotation refers to the guarantee that they're giving the owner. They give us a set price, and so long as no significant design changes, that's the cost of the work. So we've got a couple more slides, and then we'll open it up for questions. So this is the Minority and Women-Owned Business Participation Report. It kind of details the successes and shortcomings of the bidding. So you can see the overall percentage is 14.16%, but that's not evenly spread throughout all of the categories here. I do want to note that there is still opportunity to increase these numbers through third-tier subcontractors. So that's the subcontractors. And so we do have some options to consider. One option is choosing the deductive alternates. And so the town's options are here on the right, highlighted in yellow. This is the shelling out of the performance space. And so this would essentially leave an unfinished space where the performance multi-purpose room is planned to be, with kind of code minimum construction for life safety. And so it would result in a savings of $342,455. But the intent would be that the town would come back at a later date and finish that space. A couple other small ones, the acoustical ceiling baffles that are going to be installed in like the lobby and common areas to reduce some of the echoes. We could increase the spacing from 8 to 12 inches. May have a slight impact on the acoustics of the building. And then fiber optic cabling reduction. This would be to eliminate the underground fiber on the south and east side of the buildings, which are there for kind of future connectivity. So taking them out wouldn't have an immediate impact on the functionality of the building. But the key there is that the ground will already be excavated, so it's an ideal time to install that. And so again, the county's options here, shelling out their library and their skills center, and then also the shared costs. So they could potentially see a deduct of $865,000. Our next option to reduce project cost is to continue to value engineer during construction. And so the example I have on here is the steel scope, which saw the greatest escalation through bidding. And so we would work with the steel contractor to find opportunities to cut costs during construction. However, those savings would be retroactive. It wouldn't affect the current GMP. And so here we have the total project costs. First line item is construction. As I said, $15.5 million for the town, $19 million for the county. Design fees, and then the FF&E and contingency budget. So furniture, fixtures, and equipment, the town cost would be $1.6 million. And then the owner's contingency, 5% split with the county. So total project cost for the town, here we're looking at right less than $19 million. The county is $22.2 million. So Arch will take it from here, but I wanted to pause for questions. So
Ben, thanks very much. And also Chad and Eric, appreciate your review of the escalation details. And before I do have some council members, starting with Barbara, who will have some questions. I just want to, Ben, can you remind us before I go to Barbara, what portions of the presentation are remaining? We're going to hear from Arch and his finance team about the financing of the project. Is there anything more after that?
Right. Arch will present along with David about financing, and then we'll just review kind of the next steps.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay. We'll go to Barbara first and then go to Susan.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Ben, for the presentation. So I just have a couple of comments. One is something I've been wondering about. Can you go back to the first, second, and third, the floor plans in your presentation? I think it was at the very beginning. And the blue, let's see, the blue is the town of Carrboro spaces. So we have spaces on the first, second, and third floors. Is that correct?
That's
we have space. Okay. And so what I'm really wondering about is our Parks and Rec department, because I think I'm trying to figure out, is the whole department moving over? Is part of the department going to move over? If all of the department is moving over, what happens to the space in the Century Center? I think I know what might happen to it, but I'm not sure. And I don't think I've heard the answer. So is all of Parks and Rec moving over? I guess that would be the first question.
All the staff will. There are plans to continue for the Century Hall to be program space that Rec and Parks will manage, and so there may be one or two staff that stay back to manage that space.
Okay. And my second comment is about the MWBE, mainly the minority business participation, and thank you for letting us know that there will be other opportunities, because right now it doesn't look great. Can you go to that slide really quickly for me, please? So yeah, and so okay. All right. What is general trades? What is that? Do you know what that is? What does general trades mean? It sounds like it's some.
Eric, do you want to?
I'll answer that, Ben. Yeah. So general trades is a package that we bid out. They provide various scope items like general cleanup. They liable to perform safety manners for putting up temporary handrails around open pits, things like that. So that's what that general trades is captured for. Is with using those trades to do daily cleanup and temporary safety handrails, things like that on the project.
Okay. And then I see toilet special, blah, blah, blah. So I want to hear a little bit more about your outreach, like because this right here, especially for African American, this does not look good. It just doesn't. I mean, I see the white female at 2.8, Hispanic 1.1. And so, I really, really would like to see more African American participation, because it seems like white females getting fairly decent, Hispanic, so. And so I just want to know what type of outreach you're using and how you plan to escalate that outreach, to hopefully make the numbers look better. I know this is just the beginning, and I understand that.
And you're correct. And I'll let Eric talk a little bit about our outreach efforts that we provided on the job here. And to your point, this is just a draft. So, this is something that we will track each month and provide in a report summary. As the owner, will track and account every dollar spent for every first tier, second tier, third tier supplier, vendor. And again, there is opportunity here. There's things that, we also want to make sure we're tracking local participation. I think that's something that we try to do, is while you don't track it per se on a reporting structure, but it's something that we try to do at Barnhill, is to make sure that we're tracking the local dollars spent within a community, because we have some responsibilities there. So, Eric, why don't you share with the group a little bit about our efforts and our participation as far as the outreach, and then we can talk more about how we can possibly take advantage of some opportunities to attract more participation to this project.
Thank you.
So the way before we even kind of kick off starting to bid a project, we advertise in the paper. We advertise typically in a minority paper. This project specifically, we advertised in the Greater Diversity and a few of the other bigger papers in the Raleigh area. For the minority participation, though, we did target the Greater Diversity, advertised in there. Also, we, in the beginning, I guess it would have been the end of December, early January, we held a minority outreach meeting where we had 70 to 100 contractors attend the meeting. And it's really kind of an opportunity to discuss opportunities of how to get involved with the project, and also to network businesses. So it's not limited to just, first tier subcontractors. It's for second and third tier contractors. They come and they reach out to us, and we certainly share that contact information. And then, as the project is going through the bidding phases, if they're not a first tier sub, we certainly encourage them to provide their bids to them first tier contractors. Additionally, we use the state construction registry for minority owned businesses to track companies and encourage that participation. So just kind of another tool that we use, and then we kind of track it with this kind of spreadsheet right here. And you're exactly right. There's a lot of white females specifically and Hispanic, which I think could even be improved a little bit. The goal for the project was 10%, but I feel confident that there's, on some of these larger packages like site and steel, there's opportunity to get more participation involved. And in doing that, as we kind of head and progress into the project, we will certainly encourage our subcontractors to do just that.
Well, I appreciate the response from both of you. The town of Carrboro, as part of our diversity and inclusion efforts, that also goes to procurement, as it relates to who we, do business with. And so it's important to us in that way. It's also about opportunity and access, for minorities, for a contract this size. And I just wanted to lift that up. I also appreciate that Mayor Pro Tem Romaine, she mentioned it in an email as well. And I think my other colleagues, align with me on this very important issue. It comes down to also our values, and procurement is not, there's not an exception there. So thank you. And I look forward to hearing more as we get farther down the road.
Well, I'll give you our commitment that we'll continue to work on this and continue to challenge our sub partners. I'm really a little bit surprised when I look at some of the larger packages, MEP in particular, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. I know there are minority firms. I mentioned this to Ben on the call the other day that we work with a minority firm out of Greensboro, Antonio Wallace, who is GPS Plumbing Supplies, who's minority owned. And he does a lot of work for Barnhill Contracting Company and supplies a lot of materials, especially on the mechanical and plumbing side. So, when we see a package like plumbing that's roughly $850,000, HVAC that's almost $2 million, and then electrical is $4 million. And as Eric mentioned, the state minimum is 10%. And, I got to say, that's never our goal. Our goal is to always try to be somewhere in that 25% range. We have that responsibility to these projects and to the communities. So, when I see these when you're looking at a $4 million contract and you're telling me they can only get $21,000 of participation on a $4 million contract, personally, that disturbs me. And, I know the owners of LJ Electric, and we can go to them and have these conversations and challenge them to be better at providing more participation and opportunities. So again, we want to do the right thing here, and we owe it to your project that we're not just going to lay down on 14%, that we're going to try to push all these percentages across the board.
That sounds good. Thank you so much, Chad, and the other gentleman, Eric. Yeah, thank you. That's it for me, Mayor. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. I really appreciate you honing in on that question. It's really important, as you said, to live our values in this particular way. Next up is Susan.
Thank you. And yes, I want to also say thank you, Barbara, for raising those questions. And also thank you, Chad, for committing to try to improve these numbers. I wanted to start off with the a possibility of rebidding in just certain areas. So it looks like concrete, drywall, electrical, especially steel, have been areas where there's been huge price escalations. And in the background materials, it mentioned this possibility of rebidding in some of these areas. And so talk us through in terms of how hopeful you are that maybe these prices could come down with the rebidding. But also there was, I think, concern of what this would mean for the scheduling of the finance package. And if you could speak to that, what do we need to worry about if we should decide to rebid on some of these things?
Ben, I can answer, I think, maybe a part of that question. You know, I will tell you our crystal ball that I don't think you're going to see the prices flatten off. While I've been in a lot of the AG, I'm actually on the board of Carolina's AGC, and we have a lot of conversations of what things going on in the industry and the market. And you know, my fear is not that the prices are going to, the curve's going to flatten out. My concern is that you're going to see a huge uptick, and I would say that even given prior to the global crisis and everything's happening in the UK. So, but we're seeing it right now at the pumps. We're seeing gas prices spike. We haven't seen any relief on supply chain issues. Obviously, I don't think that we're going to see costs come down in the near future. I think also what there's going to be is a ripple effect now that the state has approved the budget, and there is going to be a huge amount of work available. I know that a lot of public entities are trying to figure out how to spend this money, and so what you're going to find yourself in is competition of staying out in front of these other projects that are going to bid in the near future. And what I realize is once subcontractors have a healthy backlog, they're going to be a lot more selective about the work they take on. And if they're going to price it, they're probably going to put a premium price because they know there is a workforce shortage and it's coming quickly at us because of the volume of work across the state of North Carolina. Can we rebid these packages? Absolutely. In order to rebid these, there's things that we have to do to comply with North Carolina general statutes. We have to make changes as to the design, and I believe the design team is on the call, Ben. So there will be things that we have to go back and reconsider from a design aspect, make changes, and then once we do that, then we have to go back through the procurement phase of re-advertisement, pre-qualifications, and then obviously the bid phase. And I'll stop and if there's any questions of what I just said, but I think Ben probably has a lot more information on the financing piece.
Sure. Right. So I'll just add that the financing schedule that we're currently following or tracking on does have some deadlines, so to speak. So in order to rebid one package, like Chad said, you kind of have to rebid the entire building due to a lot of these bids are only good for 90 days. And so in order to get the financing approved, we need an approved GMP. And so in order to get that accomplished, we'll need all packages bid out. If that makes sense.
Thank you for that. It's kind of sobering. Yeah, I imagine I reacted. Well, I'll just speak for myself. When I saw the $9.5 million hike, I guess the best way to describe it was guaranteed maximum sticker shock for me. I mean, I was surprised, shocked. And so what you mean, I'm still, I still support this project, but we're also stewards of the town's finances, and I can only support it at this point if we start looking at ways that we can be scaling back and having to make some really, really tough decisions. And one of those, I would be curious to learn a little bit more about the shelling out. You mentioned the shelling out of the black box. And I don't quite know enough about what that means in terms of, if you shell out, how ready will this performance area be when we decide we're ready to jump back into that? Is it pretty much ready to go, or there's still a lot of work that needs to be done at that point? In other words, describe for me a little bit more what that means about shelling out.
Derek Jones, or do you want to hop in?
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. Shelling out basically means building the walls and the shell of the space. There would be no finishes. There would be code minimum lighting. There would be no floor, just bare concrete floor. So you'd have to come in, and I'm not sure, I think HVAC ductwork would be stubbed in. So the full duct extensions would not be present in there. So there's, if you think of like a spec office building, when you go to an unfinished floor, I think it'd be very much like that unfinished floor. Eric, is that a decent description?
Yeah, and then I would add that, I would give the caveat to the accepting these deducts, that with the talk of escalation and all the things, if you were to hypothetically accept A10 and get that deduct for $342,000 in time, if you accepted that alternate towards the end of the project and decide you wanted to go, or a year or two down the road, it would be more than $342,000 to get that cost of work in place. So it's kind of just that disclaimer on those alternates as well. It's just kind of the way the market's trending.
There's a certain economy of scale with this pricing. For example, the flooring guy bid based on the whole 50-something thousand square feet of the building. To rebid out a smaller space, you wouldn't necessarily get a rate for like that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I have just one more question, and it's about parking. And I didn't know if this was the time to ask that question, or is that in another section?
No, now is a good time.
Okay. I may have understood, and actually, I think this is a question for you, Derek. I may have misunderstood, but I remember when we were talking about the parking, we talked about the spaces being in trays. And as I recall, there were 20-something spaces per tray. And so if we reduced the parking by a tray, there would not be too much additional cost incurred in terms of the redesign of the 203. So my first question is to just confirm that that's accurate.
So there, if you think of the parking as two sides, it's like two split ramps, and each side, we call each side a tray, then you're correct that the very top tray, which is about 20 spaces or so, would not be a huge lift in terms of redesign. It doesn't have a lot of ripple effect. However, when you go to the second tray, it has a lot more impact, because now your elevators, it has a lot more impact and a lot more savings, actually. Because you can reduce the height of your elevators by a floor, you can take your staircases down by a floor. But there's also complications because we have our HVAC mechanical space is on that level. So when that level goes away, we have to find new place to put it and a new way to route it through, because the current path may not work. I don't know. But we did explore that, I think, back in the SD phase. So that was, I think it was November of 2020, October, November 2020, and much more schematic plans then. And as you can see, it was a different economy as well. So I'm not quite sure if we did redesign that, you would, in order to update the GMP, there would be we guesstimated 4 to 6 weeks of redesign time, and then how that goes back to the bidding. And I don't know what the full ripple effect of the timing would be. But with, annual escalation of what we've seen, you maybe find yourself right back where you were, but with, 20 or 40 less spaces.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to add that I think we still need to explore this idea, but a minimum those 20 spaces on the top layer that wouldn't have that ripple effect. And I just wanted to also add that the Art Center will be moving into their new space at 400 Roberson Street. And they apparently are open to the possibility of leasing 36 spaces on a long-term basis after they close on that property at the end of this month. So I just wanted to be throwing that out, that should we get to that point, we can reduce some parking here. We may be able to tap into some leased parking through the Art Center. Anyway, that's all. Thank you so much for all of your help.
For those questions, Susan. Next up is Danny.
Yeah, really appreciate those questions, Susan, and thinking about that second tray where we start to get into the serious savings. I think if I have it right, Mr. Manager can maybe correct me, we're up to something around $48,000 per parking space so 40 of those is almost $2 million. I wonder whether, just to get some idea of the scope of design time and the potential offset costs of then incurring the knock-on effects of the design and, potentially, are we talking about close in scale or $900,000 to offset, potentially significantly less?
Are you looking to me? I'll refer that to the
so I guess
team.
I just wanted you to, if I'm wrong about that $48,000, just completely incorrect about my scope of the estimates here.
No.
But otherwise, that's really for Ben and the rest of the team.
Yes, that's the right number, 48,000 per space.
All right. So as Derek mentioned, 4 to 6 week for redesign. Eric, you can talk about how long the full bidding process is from pre-qualification to
if we did a rebid versus, I guess, asking for the deduct straight from the concrete contractor, we would need a 21. We'd have to advertise 7 days prior, 21 days for the pre-qualification period. That'd be 28 days plus a minimum 21-day bid period. So about, what's that, about 2 months. That's expediting plus about, give or take of 5 days for scope review and kind of finalizing that number. So a month and a week, 35 days, or I'm sorry, 65 days.
I'll just add to that. Parking is somewhat based on ordinance requirements, so that would have to be looked at to see if that's even an option from the town's ordinance. And also we'd have to think about how the share is split between the county and the town, because right now the county per the building use has more than 50%, I think more than 60% of the parking deck. So it wouldn't be a full split. But so if you took the $2 million number, the town's savings may be at most 1 million, half of it.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Ben, thanks for that reminder there too about, the splits on some portions of the building. The splits between us and the county depend on what portion of the building you're talking about. And so in the case of the parking deck, for example, the savings would, the proportion to the town is smaller because the proportion of the deck that we're responsible for is smaller. Thanks for those answers. Susan, is your hand up again, or is that just a okay, cool. I see you now, Sammy. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, if I remember correctly, the parking breakdown is that we did have 20 extra spaces, not per code, but because we wanted to make up for the parking that's being displaced. And the information that Susan's sharing is valuable in that we could offset, if we took off the upper deck, town parking spaces in this project, we could offset that with the Art Center. But I do hear the contractor here talking about, the added time, that they showed us the graph of that really big peak, and then there's another one that's kind of rising. The question of knocking out 20 spaces and then being right back at where we are. So yeah, I mean, it's, this is just a gambling, really. Like no one knows exactly where it's going, and it's just like anyone's guess. And I'm just very, it's shocking what twice the price of what we had originally. I look forward to hearing from Arch in terms of, what's the town's capacity to take on twice the cost of what this project originally was.
Okay, thanks, Sammy. Why don't I had some comments as well, I think, about this, but I think maybe I'll be interested to hear from our finance team first. So why don't we go ahead and move to that and turn it over to back to Ben, and I guess invite Arch and his team to join us.
Yeah, thank you for the segue, Sammy. And Arch, do you want to? You're on mute, Arch.
Okay, now I'm off mute. Good evening, again, good evening, Mayor and council members. For this project, we're proposing to use a combination of cash and financing and borrowing some money. At the end of the year, after we paid all of our bills, what we have left off, we sort of put that in our savings account that we call fund balance, or some people call it cash reserves. And that reserve is important because it helps us to mitigate against current and future risks. For example, if we have a revenue shortfall, if we have unanticipated expenditures, economic downturns, or local disasters hit us. And those reserves helps us to be able to address those unforeseen issues. It also helps us to maintain a stable tax rate, as well as maintain the town's credit ratings. The fund balance is governed by the General Accounting Standards Board, or GASB, and is confirmed each year by our independent auditors. I'd like to talk, just go over the 5 classifications of fund balance, and then talk about what the town's current fund balance policy is. There's 5 classifications of the fund balance by the GASB, and going from the most constraining to the least constraining The first one is non-spendable fund balance. We can't spend that because it's either can't be converted to cash or we're legally or contractually required to maintain that money. The second one is restricted fund balance. And restricted fund balance are the amounts in the fund balance that are subject to be spent on a specific project it's restricted fund balance is that fund balance that the local government commission requires us to have for what they call stabilization. Committed fund balance is the amount that can be used as specified and approved by the town council. Assigned fund balance are those amounts that are set aside that's intended to be used for a specific purpose in the future. Unassigned fund balance is the money that we have available for spending out of the fund balance. And they can use, unassigned fund balance can be used for any purpose. However, because of the one-time nature of that, we generally do not use fund balance for operating or recurring expenses. The town's current fund balance policy requires the town to maintain fund balance between 22.5% and 35% of our general expenditures. If the unassigned fund balance falls below 20%, the town manager is required to develop and implement a plan to rebuild the fund balance to 22.5% within 1 year. Or two, if the unassigned fund balance exceeds 35%, the town manager may set aside an amount in assigned fund balance for transfer to future capital projects. The town council, in order to spend any fund balance, the town council is required to take formal action on that. Now, the impact of the financing, can I have a fund balance impact slide? Okay. In June, this is the impact of the proposed amount of money financing, money that we want to spend on this project. June 30th, our fund balance, unassigned fund balance was the total fund balance was $17.8 million. And below that, you can see the non-spendable amount, the restricted amount that the LDC requires us. And that gives us an unassigned fund balance of $14.7 million, or 68% of our general fund expenditures. Carrboro's share of the project cost is $18.9 million. We are proposing to use roughly $6.4 million of that so that we do not have to borrow the entire $18.9 million. If we use that amount for cash for the 203 project, then we will have a remaining fund balance of $8.4 million, which is 39% of our expenditures, which is still above the 35% requirement of the policy. And then the town would borrow $12.5 million to fund the entire $18.9 million. Now, to show you what that looks like, go over the next 5 years, what I've done here is excuse me, the blue line is what our current long-term debt is. The green line is the 203 project long-term debt. And the red line is a combination of the two, current and debt future. And I would point out in FY 23-24, we reach a peak and then we start to decline. And that's for, I think, two reasons. One is that we will be paying off the fire station number 2 debt that year. And because we borrowed with a fixed principal plus interest, we will be paying some principal down the first 2 or 3 years. So basically what we're looking at is going from $500,000 of debt to $1.5 million over the next 5 years. The town has a policy related to use and fund balance, and that is the town does not want to use more than 12% of fund balance. No, debt should not be more than 12% of our operating budget. Next slide. This slide shows you what our the percent of operating budget that the current debt service is. That's the purple line, and the red line shows us what the future and the current debt service looks like. You notice in 5 years it kind of starts to level out a little bit in 23-24, and then it's about 7.9%, almost 8% of the operating budget, compared to a ceiling of 12% of the operating budget. The last question, the last slide I have is I know there's been a lot of interest in the debt per capita, or how much the building's going to cost each resident. And what we did in finance is, in order to gauge the overall impact, the purple blue line is the current debt that we have, and the red line is if we issue additional debt, it will top out at $12,003 per capita in 24-25. And the LGC has a standard that's considered to be high of $1,514 per capita. And that's a quick bird's eye view of the impact that using fund balance to help cover the cost of this project. Now I'm going to turn it over to David Cheek, who is the managing director at First Crown Advisors, who has been working with us, on financing strategies. And so, David, I'll let you talk about the financing.
Great, thank you, Arch, and Mayor, Council. Good evening. Thanks very much for having me here tonight. As Arch said, I'm going to talk and focus on the financing piece of this transaction. Mary, if you're able to move it to the next slide, that would be great. Perfect. So as you've seen from Ben and others here, we've got the total cost of the project, a little over $41 million, and then the town's share of that cost at approximately $19 million. As Arch just went through, your plan is to use fund balance for a piece of that, and then finance approximately $12.5 million. In North Carolina, there are two main ways for entities like you all to issue debt to fund these types of projects. The two main financing structures are general obligation bonds, where you pledge the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the town. With general obligation bonds, the only way to issue those, you have to have a referendum and voter approval to do that. The town has issued general obligation bonds in the past, I think back in 2013, in connection with some greenway and sidewalk improvements there. The other way to issue debt is under North Carolina General Statute 160A20. It's commonly referred to in the public finance arena as a 160A20 financing. With that structure, you are not pledging the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the town. Instead, debt service on a borrowing under that statute is subject to annual appropriation by the town council each and every year. And the security is a deed of trust on the asset you're financing. So in this case, the building at 203. And so with a 16820 financing there, and with all debt you issue, you have two main markets to issue that debt. One is what we would call the public market, and I'll get into some details, and the other is the bank market. With the public market transaction, which you all again have done before with your general obligation bonds, you have to put together a disclosure document. It's called an official statement, and you have to get the bonds rated by one or more of the rating agencies. The town, again, has outstanding public debt. It has outstanding credit ratings, so you've gone down that path before. The other way to do it is getting a bank to lend you this money directly. So with a bank financing, you do not have to put together an offering document. You don't have to get the bonds rated. And that'll be in some of the pros and cons we talk about with this structure here. And so the two things I'll refer to with the 16820 financing is if you do it in the bank market, it's called an installment financing. If you do it in the public market, it's called a limited obligation bond. While it has two different names, depending on the market, it is the same type of financing. Again, the debt service subject to appropriation each year and a deed of trust on the building as the security there. So I'll use those terms. Those terms are used somewhat interchangeably, but it just depends on the market that you're issuing the debt in. So that's what we're looking at for this project, not a general obligation bond issue, but instead an installment financing or a limited obligation bond issue. To talk about the pros and cons for each one, if you flip to the next slide, Mary, perfect. With the bank placement, it is a much more streamlined issuance process. As I mentioned, there is no offering document, and there are no credit ratings. And so you have a lower staff time commitment, which there is a pretty big lift by staff to put together the official statement. So with a bank placement, you don't have that. And you have no credit rating requirements and no ongoing reporting or continuing disclosure requirements like you would have in a public market transaction. The other two big benefits of a bank placement are one, you can lock in your interest rate earlier, and in what is in a presumably rising interest rate environment, we've certainly been in that in the first couple of months of this year. The ability to lock in that interest rate sooner rather than later, to me, is an important factor to consider here. And then one of the other major advantages with the bank placement is you have lower upfront cost of issuance. Given the more streamlined issuance process, the professional fees are typically lower. Our fee is lower, your bond counsel's fee is lower, LGC fees are lower, no rating fees associated with it. So you just have a lower overall upfront cost of issuance. And then lastly, the other big advantage with the bank placement is you have greater prepayment flexibility. Since you are issuing this debt directly to a bank, you have the ability to negotiate that prepayment provision with that bank. You have the ability to ask for different prepayment options, and we can present those to the council and see if one is more appealing than the other. And so with the bank placement option, we put together a request for proposals. We send that out to banks. We get all those proposals in, and we ask for different prepayment options as well. But you'll see when we compare to the public market deal, you have greater flexibility, and that also may not be an economic advantage at the outset, but gives you really good flexibility going forward. The disadvantages to a bank placed deal: in the current interest rate environment, it carries a slightly higher interest rate. And so that's obviously a big one to consider there. And then the other disadvantage in this case, we're looking at a 20-year financing term for this transaction. There's a pretty limited universe of banks that are willing to lend on a fixed rate basis for the full 20-year term. There's not going to get in 7 or 10 proposals. It's a relatively limited universe of banks. With a public sale, the pros are really the cons of the bank placement. You're going to have a slightly lower interest rate in the current market environment. and the 20-year term is no issue at all. In the public market, you can go 30 years, 40 years if you wanted to, but you wouldn't have any issue with that term. The cons, again, the interest rate to me is one of the big ones out there. It's going to be about a month later with the public market sale as to when you can lock in your interest rate. So you're going to take an extra month worth of interest rate risk there. The greater staff time commitment, the higher cost of issuance, the more limited prepayment flexibility. Typically with a public market sale, you have a 10-year no call, no prepayment period. And so you wouldn't be able to prepay or refinance this until year 10 of a 20-year transaction. And then you have ongoing reporting or continuing disclosure requirements. You have to post your audit and certain financial and operating data each and every year. You have to keep track of certain material events that happen and report that to the market. And then you have to maintain your credit ratings. Once you have the credit ratings on the bonds for that 20-year period, the rating agencies have an obligation to keep up with you and make sure their rating is current and reflective of your current financial standing. And so you're going to have those periodic rating agency interactions. From just an economic perspective, if you move to the next slide, comparing the two different options based on estimated current market rates, and I do want to stress estimated here. We've seen a pretty volatile interest rate environment over really since the start of this year. Beginning in January, we saw rates jump up right out of the gate there, primarily driven by the inflationary concerns, by the expected aggressive action by the Fed starting at its meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And so with that, interest rates really rose about 50 basis points or 0.5% in the first 6 weeks or so of the year. And then the last week or two with the conflict in Ukraine, it's been incredibly volatile, both intraday and day to day. Rates have been moving around. So these are based on estimated rates as of last week. These would continue to change going forward. That said, we do have to, pick our structure in our market, I should say, now in order to kind of make the next steps happen and be ready to close on this financing here in a couple of months. But using those estimated interest rates there, looking at the bank-placed option and the public market option, a couple of things I want to point out. You'll see slightly different borrowing amounts. That par amount under each of the two structures there are slightly different. I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the project fund. Both of these financings are going to give you approximately $12.5 million in the project, in your construction fund to put towards the project. You do have different, or you will have that different cost of issuance for each. As I mentioned with the bank place deal, your cost of issuance is going to be a little bit lower. I have an estimated figure in there that has not been fine-tuned yet, but I think that's a good estimate. With the public market side, that cost of issuance is going to be higher. And then you also have another party, an underwriter, who is coming in and whose job is to sell the bonds to different investors in the public market. They charge a fee as well on that. And so that's a couple of the differences, but both of these generate the same project fund amount. You'll see in the public market scenario, your par amount is lower than the bank placed. However, with a public market sale, you typically generate premium. Not to get too far in the weeds here, but bond investors will generally pay you more than 100 cents on the dollar to get a coupon or interest rate that is higher than the current market yield. And so when we compare these two, we're really looking at the total sources of funds and then the total uses of funds there. But the punchline here is that a public market scenario, as I mentioned, is a slightly lower interest rate. If we look at the all-in true interest cost at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, that is taking into account both the interest rate and the upfront cost. Your all-in true interest cost on a bank-placed financing would be about 2.74%. And then the all-in true interest cost on the public market scenario would be about 2.57%. So a difference of 17 basis points or 0.17%. With a $12.5 million approximate borrowing, from a dollar perspective, that's about $395,000 over a 20-year period. It's not quite, 400,000 divided by 20 years, so 20,000 per year on average it is. But you'll see in the far right, actually the bank placement gives you a slightly lower cost over the first 7-8 years or so, and then the public market provides a benefit in the last 10 or 11 years out there. And so this is the math we run, and we want to show you the math and also talk about some of those non-economic pros and cons out there, specifically with the bank place side, locking in the interest rate a month earlier and greater prepayment flexibility and kind of a lesser staff time commitment and cost of issuance there. Taking all that into consideration and knowing kind of placing a little bit more value on locking the interest rate in earlier, our recommendation to the town would be to go with the bank placed scenario. And that is what we've sketched out from a financing standpoint. Actually, before we leave this slide, one thing I want to note, and this ties into the debt service figures that Arch just went through. Under these structures, we are doing just interest only in fiscal year 2023. And then your principal repayment is going to start in fiscal year 2024 and go out through fiscal year 2042. It's going to be a level principal structure. And as Arch noted there, your highest payment is going to be your first year, your first full year, in this case, fiscal year 2024, and it goes down slightly thereafter. From a scheduling standpoint, on the next and last slide here, if we went with the bank-placed installment financing scenario, there's a couple of key things to point out. The two main actions, or there are two main actions by town council. The first would be, in addition to just approving the final GMP, if you did that at your March 15th meeting, which is assumed in this financing schedule, but of course we can adjust to whatever that ends up being. The two main financing related actions by the town council would or could occur on April 5th. On that meeting, you would adopt what's called a preliminary resolution. It's a very high level resolution. It sets forth your not to exceed borrowing amount, has a couple of other findings there that are required by the local government commission. And you would also hold a public hearing. For any installment financing that involves real estate, you have to hold a public hearing because you're putting a deed of trust, you're granting a security interest in that land and building there. And so you have to hold a public hearing. That could be done at the same meeting. And then the second town council action would or could occur approximately a month later at your May 3rd meeting, where you would adopt what's called an approving resolution. In the approving resolution, it would have the specific details of the borrowing. We're borrowing X amount over this term. X bank is our lender. Here's the rate. It would have more details, more specifics on the actual borrowing. The other key piece to this, the approval that's needed, is from the LGC or local government commission. As y'all may know, they've got to approve all the financings that take place in North Carolina, other than vehicle and equipment type financings. In order to, the local government commission meets on the first Tuesday of every month, unless the Tuesday is a holiday or the Monday before it's a holiday and they kick it to the second week. But in May, that first Tuesday is May 3rd. In order to get on the local government commission's agenda for approval, they require that you submit an application, and that application needs to be in approximately 4 weeks before their meeting date. So in this case, 4 weeks before May 3rd would be on April 5th. Technically, I've got this going in on April 6th because a part of the application would be that adopted preliminary resolution and minutes from a public hearing. There's a couple other things that go in that. The other really big component to this, and this is what I think Ben was alluding to earlier, to the extent you all look to rebid anything, the biggest piece to the LGC application, in addition to the town council approval, is your guaranteed maximum price contract. And so the local government commission wants to be sure that you have price certainty on your project before you go and borrow money. And so that GMP is critical as a part of the application package. And so that's really the start of any financing schedule for a new money project like this is, and Arch is probably tired of me asking it over the last couple of years, y'all been looking at this, but when are you going to finalize your GMP? Because that drives the financing schedule, because that tells us when we can submit our application to the LGC and when we can get approval. So To the extent that changes and you don't do that this month, then we would adjust our financing schedule accordingly. As I mentioned, from the financing piece, we would put together a request for proposals. We would send that out to a long list of banks out there. We keep a list of roughly 35 banks out there. We send it to all 35 banks for every deal, even though in this case, we know a lot of those, large majority of those banks are not going to bid on a 20-year fixed rate financing, but we will still get a number of proposals for you to consider. But we get that out there. We give banks about 3 weeks to review and respond. And so under this schedule, we have bank bids coming back in on April 4th. And that's by design so that at your April 5th meeting, when you're adopting your preliminary resolution and holding your public hearing, we can also share with you the results of the bank bid process. If there's any questions that we want to run by you in terms of different prepayment options, we can do it at that time. But that's why those are linked up there. There's also the bond document drafting process. Your bond counsel, Bob Jessup, would do that, lead you through that. And so that's the various distribution of documents there. But those are the highlights from the approval process and getting the bank bids in. Again, all of this assumes we go with the installment finance, the bank place installment financing, as opposed to the public market limited obligation bond option. And that's all I had prepared, but happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you very much, David. It's really good to have this detail in front of us tonight, and certainly an important part of the decision we all have to make in a couple weeks. Arch and or Ben, do we have anything else to hear from you about? Looks like we do. Ben, go ahead.
All right, so the next steps were kind of laid out. Everything is kind of tracking on the financing schedule, and so kind of the milestones here. We'll receive your comments tonight, and also the county's comments. As I mentioned, they're receiving the same information tonight. And the schedule is to bring the final GMP forward on the 15th for consideration. And we will update the project ordinance and then, into the financing schedule that David presented. And so the LGC is kind of the critical piece there. And so potentially a groundbreaking or kind of project kickoff in May.
Okay, good. Thanks again, Ben, and everyone who was able to be here tonight. I think it might be helpful, Ben, if we stopped sharing your screen for the time being. Thanks. Okay, so we have time tonight to ask questions of our various presenters. And then with the expectation that this matter would come back before the town council in 2 weeks for an actual decision. So tonight is an opportunity for us to really get the information we need. And we'll start with that with Sammy, and then we'll go to Susan.
So thanks to everyone for all your work on this. I know it's a really hard time, and it's translating into a serious cost increase of $9.5 million from where we departed originally at 10 million. And so there seems to be an urgency to kind of lock that in or not, because no one knows where it's going. Delay clearly has translated into higher costs. I just want to bring some further context into this conversation in terms of that point of delay. And yesterday, it was said that delay is death. That was said by Antonio Guterres, who's the UN chief, in regard to the latest IPCC report, of which I'm going to read 2 paragraphs. their summary for policymakers has all these paragraphs of things that they believe are high confidence or low confidence. One says societal choices and actions implemented in the next decade determine the extent to which medium and long-term pathways will deliver higher or lower climate resilient development. That's with high confidence. Importantly, climate resilient development prospects are increasingly limited if current greenhouse gas emissions do not rapidly decline, especially if 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming is exceeded in the near term. That's also with high confidence. And they conclude their whole summary with this last paragraph. The cumulative scientific evidence is unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. Any further delay in concerted anticipatory global action on adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. Now, some may wonder, like, why am I bringing this up when we're talking about this project tonight? Others of you may not, because I've been bringing this up every opportunity during this conversations about this project. What the money represented by this project is in regard to opportunity cost in terms of what we should be doing locally for doing our part in regard to the goals on taking climate action that we have set of 80% below 2010 levels by 2030, is we're significantly tying our hands in this 10-year window of spending and taking action. Staff did a sketch of what the cost is to achieve our climate action goals over the next 10 years. And that sketch showed that it represents 100% of our total budget, which is very unrealistic. But assuming state and federal and county support, typically localities allocate 20% to a remaining 80% match. All that to say that what that means for us annually is about $4 million a year. And looking at the financing that Arch laid out and our consultant, they're estimating about $1 million a year for the next 10 years. If we also include the cash that comes out of the fund balance, the 6.5 for cash, and then the 12.6 that we borrow. And that's not even talking about the remaining years thereafter, after this 10-year window. And then we're also decreasing our capacity to take on debt, in that we're reaching those ceilings that are set by ourselves and the state itself. So, you know, I bring this up because just to put some perspective, that's a quarter of what we have committed to potentially spend in regard to meeting our climate action goals. If our annual expenditure on climate action at 20% of what it would take to achieve our goal is $4 million a year, and we're spending $1 million, that's a quarter of what it represents. So I bring that all into context because, again, this is one more chance we have to you know, address this delay in terms of cost for this project, or delay in terms of death, existential threat to humanity, and doing our part in regard to that. And you know, for y'all, I'm very sorry. It's a very heavy choice, you know, what to do in terms of the first kind of delay. For me, it's very clear. I'm you know, I'm not going to vote for this tonight. I placed my you know, vote on a vote for a continuation of the human experience, of our opportunity to experience places such as libraries, nature, having future for our children. So it's sadly very easy for me to vote no tonight. But that's where I'm at. I don't even know if we have a vote tonight, but you know, when we do have a vote. Thanks.
Thank you, Sammy. Yeah, and just to clarify, we're not voting on anything tonight, but I think the idea is that we would come back in 2 weeks to consider that decision that you talked about. Thank you for that, Sammy. Susan, you're next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for those comments, Sammy. and I do appreciate them. I want to appreciate everybody here. I think working on this 203 project, it's just been a historic time. I mean, never would we have expected to be at this time with all of these disrupted supply chains and labor shortages. And I know it's been a really stressful time for all of you as well. Sammy, I appreciate your comments as passionately as you feel about the climate mitigation. And I share that, but also I feel equally passionately about moving forward with this project. On the, just sort of seeing this as such an important community hub with so many really, really critical programs and services all under one roof, and meeting in so many ways, meeting our climate mitigation goals as well as our racial equity goals and our literacy goals and our teen services and our job development skills. And there's just so many things under this one roof. But to get there, I do have a question, again, looking at ways can we save some money? And Arch, I think this is a question for you. I wanted to ask you about the contingency, the owner's contingency. It was the very first slide that I think it was the first slide you showed us on our borrowing versus how much we could pay for this with our balance. And I know that I'm mentioning this because in the Orange County presentation, there was talk about reducing the contingency fees from 5% to 4% or even down to 3%. And I didn't know if that's something that we can also consider. And if we did lower our contingency fees, what are the risks of doing that?
Archie, I think you're still on mute there, Arch. Thank you.
I think Ben could probably answer this better, but the contingency fee is that if we reduce it, we would reduce the amount of cash that we would put in. I purposely targeted contingency because contingency may or may not be spent. And if it's not spent, then it stays in our bank. Ben might have a look on the impact of the construction.
Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Arch. I guess what I'm asking is, are we still being prudent if we have a 3% contingency?
I would say that if we reduced it to 3%, we would still be being prudent. Like I said, the contingency may or may not get spent, but in the current economic market that we're dealing with, all bets are off. You just don't know what's going to happen, and so that's just kind of like if something drastic happened, that would allow us to address that. But I think 3%, 5%, from a contingency standpoint, is reasonable.
Final question, and I promise that's it. I appreciated your number. How much will this project cost each community member in Carrboro? And your number was $12.50 per year over the life of the project. And I think you estimated the building is having an 80-year lifespan. Tell me just a tiny bit, how did you get that $12.50 number?
Well, I did. I'm going to have to defer to Ben on this one because Ben is an honorary finance staff. Yeah, so Ben calculated that, and what I showed you was the sum total of our current debt plus taking on this new debt, over 5 years, what that impact would be. So Ben, $12.
Yeah, the $1,000 that was the debt estimated for just the 203 project, and then 80 years. I mean, I just felt that was a reasonable lifespan for this building. I mean, the town hall was built more than 100 years ago, and it's still being used. And I think Carrboro has long building life cycles, so that's why I used 80 years. But 50 years is sometimes used as a life cycle of a building.
Mhm. That's good to know. It makes it a little bit easier for us to know the impact on each person in Carrboro. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you all.
Thank you, Susan. I would just say that I would appreciate maybe some more follow-up when you have a chance, Mr. Manager, on Susan's question about contingency percentage. Just as a point of clarification about what the benefits or drawbacks of having a lower versus higher percentage would be, 3% versus 5%, for example. Not sure I totally am hearing exactly what I need to understand there. So just more information about that would be helpful, either by email or tonight or in 2 weeks. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, Randy's hand is up. So Randy, you're next.
Yeah, David, I really appreciate what you walked us through. I appreciated Barnhill, Chad and Eric making very clear what's happening with construction costs and why, on how things look. Arch and your team, Ben, it's sobering. It is sobering. However, we know that that the delays that we've had, impacted costs. We know that this is something that deeply benefits community, and the community is very strongly in favor of not only having the library, but the many components that will be housed. I realizing the trickiness of these times, especially financially. Arch, I really appreciate what you've laid out, because it reflects a very careful look at how how investing in ourselves over time, what it looks like financially. What we cannot see in any of this, though, is what it will do in terms of fortifying downtown businesses, fortifying the destination Carrboro engagement. That's something that is not recognized here, and I don't want that lost, because that is part of how we have to vision Carrboro's future. And this project has great capacity to be a hub and further ignite the robust capacity and vibrancy of downtown Carrboro. So, and bringing community together. So I want to thank you for these efforts. It's a lot to digest. There's been some great questions that have been asked, and I look forward to taking more time. Arch, will you make your slide presentation available to us? I did take some pictures of some of the slides, but can you make your slide presentation available to us? Are you on mute?
Yeah. Yes, I can make that available to the council.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arch.
Thanks, Arch, and thank you, Randy, for those comments. And actually, Mr. Manager, I think it might be beneficial for all of us if we received the entire slide presentation at some point after tonight's meeting. Thank you. I think one question of just kind of a clarification for my benefit, really, and maybe this is a question for Ben. You had one of the slides that listed these what you call deduct alternatives or alternates, which are a variety of ways that you sort of laid out that we might sort of save a cost here, save some costs here or there, whether it's something as big as shelling out large portions of the project or other savings. Some of those were things that the town could do in its portions of the project. Some were, and the larger ones were the things that the county might be able to do to lower their initial cost. Are all of the things on that list that you've labeled deduct alternates things that you consider not major design changes and therefore wouldn't require rebidding, or are these things that would require some kind of rebidding and therefore extending the timeline of the whole financial picture?
So those were alternates in the bid documents, so they're included in the current design.
Gotcha.
And so as part of the bid package, the contractors bid on the base bid, which is the full build out of the building, and then they give an alternate, in some cases a deductive alternate, based on that specified change of scope.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. So these are items on that list that are part of the bid package already, or that we've received as the bids. And so it wouldn't require rebidding because that's already part of the bids. Okay, right. Thanks. Some other items that came up, though, on the other hand, are things, and I think, for example, Susan was mentioning the idea of, maybe altering one or more layers of parking deck, that kind of thing. Those are things that would require rebidding, is because they would involve some significant redesign work. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, thanks. I think I'm sort of, wrestling here with a lot of the information that we all are, and many of you have already talked about some of the details. For me, this escalation in cost is a concern. It's been a concern, I think, for the entire council for the entire 2 years of this project, as we've worked through the initial design and the schematic design and come back and agreed to this or that increase in the budget and so on. So that certainly weighs on all of us. I know that. I think the thing that I also have in the back, or really in the front of my mind, is that it seems likely that, or I should say, it seems unlikely that, for example, delaying the project would get us out of that continued escalation. So that is a concern too. I think we also heard that it seems likely too that we're going to see continued increase in interest rates, which I think affects our total cost to the project and so on. So I think both Randy and Susan, as they said, we have a lot here to think about, a lot of good information to pore over, talk with community members about. There certainly are a lot of benefits, both quantifiable and somewhat intangible benefits to this community with this project, as has always been the case. And so we'll continue to hear from community members about those things as well. Are there any other questions or requests for information from staff or the consultants before we let people go home tonight? Sammy?
Just briefly, since the county is considering this also tonight, if there are any discrepancies between the town and the county that are significant, how will those be resolved?
Great question. Yeah, thank you. I know, Richard, Mr. Manager, you've been in touch with the county at both your level and staff level throughout this preparation for tonight's presentations, both here and with the county commissioners, and I assume you will be in communication with the county manager again after tonight's meeting. Can you give us a sense of how you all will be communicating about both what you've heard here and what Bonnie has heard up with the county commissioners?
Yes, the first step is that we plan to check in tomorrow to compare notes between their meeting and our meeting tonight to see exactly what they heard on their side. We'll share on ours as well. And that'll give us some sense of what we do over the next 2 weeks.
Right. Right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments from council members, so I just want to echo everyone's thanks to Ben and Arch and our consultant team. This has been really informative. I appreciate all the time you spent taking us through the details of not only the construction bidding and project details, but also the financial picture. It's incredibly useful and important for us. And I hope you can all go home and get some sleep tonight. Mr. Manager, anything else on this item?
Well, that's all for tonight, Mayor.
Okay, so we'll hear back more about this in 2 weeks. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, I think the final item on our agenda tonight is matters by council members. Do we have any matters to discuss?
Just very quickly, Damon, I was interested in, you said you're going to a meeting with the districts. What exactly are they planning? Is this the school districts? Or
Oh yeah, so I serve on the steering committee for the Chapel Hill Carrboro Schools strategic plan. They're doing a new strategic plan that's kind of, it's their new strategic plan for the next several years, and so they've pulled together a steering committee of all kinds of folks, myself, a representative from Chapel Hill, students in the district, teachers, senior staff from the district, and so on, plus a consultant that they have who have specialized in developing strategic plans for school districts to talk through the values of the community around education and what the district's strategic plan and vision will be for the next several years. So that's what that committee is.
Great. Thanks, Damon. I just encourage you to make sure they maximize their energy efficiency and solarizing their buildings and all that. But also, Randy mentioned this during our climate action team, I think, making sure they make their schools as walkable as possible when they do their districting. And then, yeah, those are the main things that come to mind.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Sammy. That's really helpful. On that first item around facilities, facilities reps are actually in the room on the steering committee, so that is part of the conversation. And I think I appreciate your comment about walkability. That's important too, and I'll make a note of that when the opportunity arises.
Thanks, and share with them how we're modeling with our net zero for buildings. That they could follow suit. Thanks.
Will do. Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Sammy, seconded by Randy, that we adjourn. All in favor, please say aye by raising your hand so I can see it. All right, matter passes unanimously. Talk to you later.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Wesley.